It is so good to be here. I hope that caffeine break and that discussion beforehand about different ways to make the workplace a better, nicer place to be energized you for this discussion. I'm so glad to be here today with you, Robert. As Steve said, he is Executive Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer at Amtrak. And there have been a lot of things going on at Amtrak. And I'm sure our audience, a lot of whom may be Northeast Corridor riders or other parts, right, will be really interested to hear how you're managing sort of the explosive growth that's happening at Amtrak. So I know we had an earlier discussion to prepare for this, and you threw out a pretty astonishing statistic, which is that more than half of your current workforce has less than 3 years of experience. So I'm curious about the challenge. Can you talk about the challenge of hiring, onboarding, and training so many new employees?
Sure. So if you look at our staff right now today, over the last 3 years, more than 50% of our staff has been there for less than 3 years. If you think about statistics, in the last 24 months, we've hired close to 11,000 employees with a trend to hire another 4,500 in FY24. So we're definitely on a big hiring frenzy here at Amtrak. And I would say that it's really, really exciting because when you think about what we're doing as an organization, we recently got a significant amount of funding from President Biden regarding IIJA and the funding of $66 billion to kind of relook at our infrastructure across the United States has been nothing but a fun and exciting thing to be and do at Amtrak. And with that meant that we had to go up and relook at the staffing model to kind of make sure we had the right folks doing the right things to kind of meet those needs of the funding that we received. And it was really, really exciting for me to be part of the journey with the leadership team to kind of say, how do we leverage that with the right kind of people doing the right kind of jobs across the U.S. to ensure that we're meeting the infrastructure challenges. And with that, we think about what do we do differently and what we have to do differently in order for that to happen successfully within Amtrak. And there's a variety of different things. One, how do we get that kind of talent to come into a very unique environment, which is considered transportation? Most people, even myself, I'm new to the class 1 railroad space. Never in my million years I thought I'd be in transportation in the railroad space. And but based on all the excitement, it was just something that I had to go do. But with that, how do you identify the talent and the skill sets we need to kind of meet those needs? And I thought that, what are we gonna do? Just get conductors and people to collect the tickets and work at the booths, and that's the kind of staff we wanted. But unusually, it's nothing like that. If you think about what we do, we bring a lot of different type of talent into the organization, from engineering to project managers to accounting to procurement to all the roles you can think about within HR, but also just all the different aspects that you would see in a business is actually in the railroad space, the transportation space. And it's really exciting. But what we do and what we've done is really think about what is our strategy to, one, identify that kind of talent that we bring into the organization. So we have a really strong TA team that really understands what I would say workforce planning. Most organizations have workforce planning, but sometimes it's used different ways. And for us, we really want to plan what that looks like over the next several years to ensure that we're meeting the success and the needs of the funding that we've received, but also being leveraged in a way where we're bringing in the right kind of talent at the right time to make sure it's keeping up with the work that's coming on a daily basis, as well as looking at our internal staff that was currently there that is retirement eligible, those that are in roles that are very unique that you would not see in most environments. And then we go out and try to attract that talent. And with that, for us, it's just been really, really exciting to kind of think about how do we do that in a successful space to make sure we're doing it right, but doing it with merit and with intentions to really make the changes that we need to make across the U.S. I will say that, we had a strong referral program where we would pay our employees. Of course, everyone knows what employee referral program is, but we would pay employees to refer people to come work at Amtrak if they were the right leaders and folks that would meet our need of our business. But also we just have all these different types of initiatives that kind of gets people excited around why not Amtrak versus somewhere else? So when we get to compete against companies like Google and Amazon, we're getting the same talent they're getting from the IT perspective, from the business development perspective, from all your functional corporate support areas. And it's been really, really great for us. So we do a lot of cool stuff that I think that has added value, not only to the railroad space, but also to where we want to be, where we need to go in the future for Amtrak with all the funding that we've gotten so far.
That's great. So you have brought on a lot of new people in a very short time. So talk about how you bridge the gap between veterans who have been there and remember Amtrak and new people. And I know there's also a generational thing. I see this in my own workplace, right?
Sure.
You've got the older reporters or editors, these millennials, or, Gen Z. I don't know what Gen Alpha probably isn't ready yet. But talk about that challenge of
Sure.
building a culture.
So as you build a culture, there's a couple of things I was just going to add. We did not take for granted how we onboard people. So when we identify the talent and we get them to come, it's really about how we onboard them, making sure they understand what we're about and what we do as an organization. And that's really, really critical. But I will tell you, over the last 2 years that I've been there, there was something that I thought was extremely special that made the difference as to why Amtrak and how do we make that transitional with the generational gaps that we have right now. And I think the biggest thing is one, as a leader and as leaders within the organization, do we understand the people that work for us? Do we understand our workforce? Do we understand what they look for, what they need, what they're interested in, what they're saying, what's important to them, what's not important to them? And for us, we got that data. I think most companies have data. How many people here in the audience do employee engagement surveys? Right? So we did that and we've seen that data. And what I noticed when I first came on board is that we did employee engagement surveys. And we did it for the last 10 years prior to me even being there. And what was most astonishing was that all the data that was in those reports, what we did and what was coming out of it never changed, right? The same thing we saw 10 years ago, the same thing we're seeing today. And all we're seeing is this new faces and new generations impacting the same voices that what they're saying. So we said, what do we need to do differently within the organization to kind of evolve and change that? And with that, how we close that gap is we want to create a strategy that aligns to what our employees are saying. And most people say, well, organizational strategy is usually created by the CEO, the executive team, and you say, here's what you're going to do, and you go do it. Well, we did something a little bit different. We said, let's take all the data that we got from all the feedback we've heard from our employees. And let's survey our executives and our leaders to find out what they're saying. And we took all that data and we kind of said, okay, now we understand all this data. What do we do with it? So we took the data and we said, let's synthesize that data and look at some high level buckets that makes the most sense as we create our strategy, because we don't just want the strategy to be the strategy. We want the strategy to be able to connect to the people who does it every day out there in the front line. And with that, we wound up coming up with 4 major buckets that really distinguish what our strategy should be. And the first one was really around how do we empower our people? And that came from a variety of different things. What does empower our people mean? Well, how can you be a leader if you don't know how to manage yourself? We heard a lot of feedback around leaders trying to be leaders, but they don't even know how to manage themselves. I heard in the audience, the past panel, equipping leaders with the right skill sets to be leaders. And do we do that right? Other things was really around, do our employees feel trusted? Do they trust our leadership? Do they believe that we're all aligned and on the same page? Do they feel as though that, the things we're doing, they can impact it from what they do and what role they play, because we have diverse roles within the organization. So empower people became one of our strategy buckets that we look for. The second one's really around what we do as a transportation company, which is we have a ton of customers. Everything we do is around customers. So we came with this word and it sounded really weird at first, but we said, how do we delight our customers? Right? And delight our customers became one of those things where, we want to delight our customers in everything and anything that we do when they get on our trains. So we made it very strong to kind of talk about what it means to delight our customers. And the next one was really around all the work that we're doing, all the construction practices we have out there in the US. How do we drive transformation? Because driving transformation right now, not only with technology, but with construction and a variety of different things we do, is super, super important that we want to focus on. And then the other one was really around grow our business. So when we created those 4 major buckets, we then says, how do we create metrics that actually ties back to how we get there as an organization. I think earlier I heard on this panel, they were talking about the mission of the organization. And in the mission of the organization, people say that's how you connect the employees. Well, I think when you connect employees, the mission and the vision is something you should already have and feel comfortable with prior to you joining a company. When you get there with our young millennials and the generational gap is, how do I impact where the company's going? And if you understand how you impact where the company's going, now you become now personally invested into the organization. And when you become personally invested in the organization, you now understand what your role is, no matter what position you have within the organization, how you directly impact the strategy where the company's going. And for me, that's super, super important. And that was super, super for our leadership team to do, is really to create those 4 major buckets based on the feedback and the data we got. And then how do we create the metrics to kind of show how every organization impacts that? Now, most people say, well, you got empower our people. Empower our people, that's an HR initiative. Well, no, it's not. We looked at all of our goals to kind of say each of these goals or each of these initiatives or actions are really important. And how do you leverage that cross-functionally? Because then at that point, as an HR person in the organization, I understand how I can delight customers. I understand how I can empower our people, drive transformation, as well as grow the business. So there's things we do within each of our functional areas that kind of impact all 4 of those buckets. Some maybe more than others, but all that came together. And with that, it wound up bringing not only the organization together, but when we go to orientation, when we recruit people, when we identify talent, when we talk about the most important things we want to do at Amtrak, people now can connect the dots as to the role they're coming into, how they impact the strategy, and how they become even more closely invested into where we're going and what we're doing. And you can see the metrics moving because we want to make sure those metrics are measurable as well. So it becomes a lot of fun within the organization because everyone understands the organization, where it's going, and how we all connect together and how they impact it. So for us, we see that as a big success for Amtrak. It's just early stages of it, but the beginning of this and how HR and the leadership team and the strategy team has all worked together has made this such a big, exciting place to come work for. And it's been a lot of fun. So connecting those gaps has been really significant around just understanding where we're going and what we're doing as one collective team.
That's great. I love this idea about delighting customers, right? I know it seems silly. I am someone that I got my early start at Disneyland, so we know all about trying to keep people happy. But I suppose if your customers are happy, right? If someone on the front lines does something and the customer's like, this is so great, this is wonderful, they walk away feeling really good about what they do, right? Like when you have a good day at work, it's like you've scored something or you've done something that has made you happy, right? That has made you feel like, yes, right?
Yes.
So I think I know it sounds sort of silly maybe, but it is that is really a neat idea. And it also goes with empowering, right?
That's right.
Can you talk a little bit about, are you encouraging people to, I guess, is that take the initiative to delight workers or delight customers or, yeah.
Well, the change first comes with leadership, right?
Right.
Being in a Class 1 railroad environment and it happened to be railroad, there's a lot of historical things that had to be changed, needed to be changed, still needs to be changed in our environment, in our space. So, you got a lot of, how do I say this? You guys mind if I just keep it real? Because I can't fake and try to be super nice about this. I'm just a real kind of guy. We got a lot of old school folks that come to the organization that got their own set of mentality of how they operate and how they have worked all their lives, right? And change is hard for them.
Oh yeah.
And as well as not just change, but when we talk about biases within organizations, there's a lot of bias around the beliefs of how we should be and what we should be like, and also those young folks coming in here with these new ideas and think they want to be innovative. That's not how we do things here at Amtrak. So, when you want to make those changes, you got to get to educate the staff as to how to be a little bit more flexible, a little bit more understanding. And sometimes, unfortunately, if they're not meeting where we need to go, they may not be the right fit for our organization as we're trying to evolve and make those changes. And I think in the role that I get to play in is that I get to see that, but I also get to influence leaders to kind of help drive that change. So I think that in order for people to really understand what it means to, really empower our people, they got to be comfortable in that space. And I would say not everyone is. You're never going to have that. But the more and more you continue to educate, the more and more you continue to say, this is what we stand for as a leadership team. And that piece is really critical. You can't have 3 or 4 leaders feeling that way and 2 or 3 not really there yet. Because if you have that, there's a divide, and then they say that we're not aligned. So we got to ensure that it happens first at the top, and then as we think about the rest of the organization, we then encourage ELT, SLT, everyone to understand they got to embrace that same type of mantra as well. And then as we start to do that, we start to see people really believe that, it's okay to make a mistake. Because in the railroad system, making a mistake could be detrimental to your career because of you can't afford to not have an accident, right? But when you give that grace to give people that flexibility to be empowered, it's okay to talk to a customer. It's okay to make a decision without checking the handbook or the manual or what I should or shouldn't do. Just do the right thing. So one of our values is really around do the right thing, excel together, as well as put our customers first. If we model that, those things start to evolve and change and start to really get us to a point of where people feel comfortable. As a leader, I got some of my folks here in the room in the back. I can't be a leader unless I walk the walk and talk the talk and model it myself. So I don't try to be all fancy in the ELT in the boardroom. I be myself all the time, and I think people appreciate that natural self because, people say, well, we want to grow and make these leaders, and I always say, well, can you really be a leader? Or are you just authentically a leader based on who you are and how you act? And I can tell you, I can see fake leaders all the time. And sometimes it sucks because people see that, but you want them to follow. And people don't follow fakeness. They follow authentic and real people. And I think that makes a big difference. So for me, it's just really, really important for us to continue to preach that, talk about it, understand it, and people have choices. Make their own personal change because they know what they need to do next, or they can sit where they are and stay where they feel and what they believe in, and you won't see that change. And then that forces the organization to make other decisions. But I think for us, it's just really exciting to kind of know how we continue to evolve the pendulum to the right direction.
Right.
So
I see a lot of people nodding their heads. Change is hard, right? Authenticity is really important too. I think particularly among younger workers, right? They're looking for real.
They are.
And it is really important. I'm hoping you can talk about some of the ways that you bring team members from different teams together. I know that Amtrak has something called employee resource groups. And so can you talk a little bit about that and how that sort of may get people who are from different divisions together?
Absolutely. Yeah. So in 2021, believe it or not, we just created our ERGs. We have 8 ERGs within the organization. I think they're great. Coming on board as the new person in HR, that's another thing. Anyone that knows me, and this is a little sidebar thing, I always introduce myself as Robert in HR. And people always say, well, why do you introduce your Robert? Because I don't use titles. I don't believe in titles because everyone bleed and go to the bathroom like we all go the same and we look the same. And when people start using those titles, using that title is a big thing to do. Well, that doesn't define who you are. So for me, I believe I always introduce myself. My team will always know I always introduce myself as Robert Grasty from HR because I feel like I'm just part of the team. But when I think about the question, it's really around, how do we ensure that people understand? And I just lost train of thought. The question again.
Employee resource groups.
Yeah. So how do we understand how employee resource groups?
You were going in a good place.
I was going in a good place, but I got sidetracked. I apologize. That's me just being real. But with the employee resource groups, we created them because we wanted to make sure that our employees had a safe place to be able to do special things that we believe can impact the business. And I think we've done an amazing job of the participation of folks that are part of our ERGs. And we have 8 of them, as I said. And one of the things that was mandatory is that every one of our executive leaders had to be a sponsor of each of those ERGs, which is great. So now we're doing our job there. But when I came on, I took on the role. I said, okay, ERGs are great. It's great that we got all these great things we're doing. What else? Right? What else? So ERGs have been great to pull people together, great to get the camaraderie, understanding our women's group, understanding our diversity group, understanding our disability group. Don't diss our disability. I'm the sponsor of that one. Understanding NEO, which is our Hispanic group. Great. But when I think about what else are we doing in that space, it's like, okay, so when we look at succession planning, how many women and minority do we have in succession that is Hispanic? Then I go back to the ERG for Hispanic group and says, well, what are you doing to impact that? right? Because that's where the big dollars come, is when you can say we went from having 0 at the executive level to now 3 or 4, like that. How many people in disability that has a disability that sits at the executive level? So when I started to say, how do we affect the metrics that we should be looking at every day from an ERG? Now we're starting to make a change in regards to how we recruit, where we go to look at talent, and then how do we affect our metrics when it comes to succession planning, key talent, high potential talent. All of those things that we didn't think about before is what we do now differently within those ERGs, because we want to continue just to broaden that horizon, because inclusion and culture is really big for us, and that's where the ERGs sit in. And that inclusivity of our employees at all generational levels is really, really important. So having those career tracks, having that focus around the different things we affect outside of just having these nice groups is really, really important for us within the organization.
That's great. And we have 1 minute and 30 seconds. I don't know, is there something you can do? I want to be on time. I want to keep the train running on time.
You got it. You got it.
So any other closing remarks or anything?
Just for me, closing remarks is that, one of the things I found interesting when I came to Amtrak is that, it was an environment, as I said before, it was one organization I didn't think I would ever go and work for. All I know is about trains, and I didn't know a lot about trains. But when I think about the impact we're having across the U.S., making sure we're providing transportation across the U.S. and connecting more people in more places, to me, that was very, very exciting. But also, it gave me a chance to realize also that Amtrak has the ability to do a lot of cool things. So if you think about construction, for example, we have some of the largest construction projects in the U.S. You think about the connections between New Jersey into New York, the Hudson Tunnel Bridge. It is one of the largest construction projects in the U.S. And it's ran by one of our ELT members who happens to be a female, who happens to be under 30, 35 plus maybe.
Good for her.
Not to say her age, but to me, that is phenomenal. This woman is super powerful, and it's really cool to see someone in that position to be able to do that, and that's really, really cool. Another thing is that, when we look at policies and procedures, we had a lot of old school stuff that we used to do, and be able to now change and evolve that and have the impact on that, for me, has been really, really exciting. Having PTO for our agreement employees, having paid parental leave, those kind of policies, those things didn't exist then. And that was really, really important. But here's probably the biggest one that I'll say before time runs out, is that I went to a women's conference, Women in Rail conference in Chicago. And I was on stage with a bunch of CHROs, all on stage. And all the women were asking, how do you affect the inequity of pay of women and minorities in the organizations? How do you affect it? How do you affect it? And I'm listening to all my peers go down the line of things they said they wish they could change. They wish they could do this. They see it. All these things are going on. I'm like, okay, I'm looking. And they said, well, Robert, what do you think? And I started laughing because I kept it real with everyone. I didn't mean to do it on stage with the people that was on stage with me. I was like, well, it's kind of odd. Our title says that we're the head of HR, and we see the data. And you choose not to do nothing with the data you see. But yet we say we have inequity problems. So for me, it was one of those things where, damn, I must be doing something right, because I saw the data at Amtrak and I saw the inequity. We made sure that every employee, women, minority, are paid fairly and paid at the same rate of pay of all of our employees supposed to be paid. So there's no influx of salaries between minorities and women with the rest of the men and the rest of the people in the organization. And when we saw that, we made those adjustments. So we put a lot of budget dollars towards making sure that all of our employees are paid fairly and equitable across the entire footprint of Amtrak. To me, that's pretty damn powerful because that's pretty powerful because, when you look at that kind of stuff, people that can make those changes are the people that are sitting in the chairs on the stage, and they got choices to make. Look at it and do nothing, look at it or do something. So that's what I get excited about. I'm glad I've had a chance to come and talk to you ladies and gentlemen in the audience. And go Amtrak, ride us a lot. We do really good work, and when we're delayed, it's not our fault sometimes.
And remember, this gentleman is recruiting.
We are recruiting. It's a great place to work. And do appreciate the time to be here today. Thank you.
And thank you. I hope you forgive us for going over a little bit, but that was great. Thank you, Robert. Thank you all.